Welcome to another episode of Your Way or Yahweh, and our mandate is as stipulated in 2 Corinthians 10:5. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ.
All right, welcome everybody to a Friday night debate. Tonight's debate topic is, does the 7-day week prove the Christian God's authority over the world? The participants in this debate will be Mr. Delicieux, Stanley Terry. He's going to be arguing the positive, and Floyd FP will be taking the negative position on this one. So format for the debate is going to be semi-formal, but basically kind of standard. 15 to 20-minute openings for each one. Stanley Terry will be going first, and then 10 minutes or so of a rebuttal period for each participant. And then after that, it's going to open up a little bit more with back and forth discussion, and then probably some Q&A. For the audience, any technical issues that you can flag in the top chat, as usual, that's always appreciated. The only other thing I think I can say about that is if as this goes on, I'm probably going to have, if you have questions for you in the audience, try to take a note of them a little bit separately. I think once we get into the Q&A thing, the reason I say that is because if they start coming in at the beginning, no matter who you flag them for, I'm probably not going to be able to rewind them to see them. So I will probably signal to the audience when we get into the open discussion kind of Q&A portion of the debate towards the end, and then have you tag either Floyd FP or Stanley Terry, and then ask your question that way. It'll be easy for me to identify them, and hopefully it'll keep them concentrated. So plus I think the questions will be a little bit more focused because you'll have had a chance not only to see both their full presentations, but also watch their rebuttals as well. So just keep that in mind. Other than that, this should be all set to go. So what I'm going to do is turn it over and let Mr. Delicieux introduce himself first, and then Floyd FP will give a brief introduction, and then we will get started. All right, take it away.
Thank you very much. My name is Mr. Delicieux, or Stanley Terry is my name, and Mr. Delicieux is my moniker. I have a channel called Your Way or Yahweh, Tested by Fire, and our mandate is as stipulated in 2 Corinthians 10:5. We destroy every argument and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and bringing every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. So I specialize in two series in my channel. I specialize on the Sabbath challenge, what I call the Sabbath challenge, which is the proof that Jesus is sovereign over all nations, which I will be arguing for today. And my other one is the Godhead Trinity challenge, where I demonstrate the three persons of the Godhead as being a salvific Christian doctrine, and I also use it to demonstrate that the narrative in Scripture is the only one that's logical to establish a God, the God. So as opposed to all other religion, illustrated by the fact that He is a eternal God. We have a narrative that explains how an eternal God can create time and space. So that's basically it. And finally, I would like to thank Floyd FB for participating in this debate. He saw my video. It was quite exhaustive, and he should know my position. And he made a statement saying that he has an argument against my two infallible propositions, which is quite telling, especially, and I'm speaking to my Christian brothers and sisters who will be watching this on my channel. Just that statement alone implies that every single other person that tried to argue against this was not successful. So if he's saying that he's able to succeed in this task, he's conceding the fact that everybody else failed. So, and if I lose this debate, I'm saying it right now, I will become an atheist. So thank you very much, and hopefully you guys pay attention to what I'm saying.
Okay, I guess I'll go. I'm Floyd FP. I have a modest YouTube channel. I've been involved with basically Christian counter-apologetics for many years. I enjoy the philosophy of religion, as well as religious history and so forth. I love to talk about the Bible. I love talking about the philosophy of religion and so forth. So I've been around the Great Debate online community for quite a long time. I'd like to thank Stanley for participating in this debate with me, and Jefferson for hosting. And yeah, I look forward to a good discussion. I did see Stanley's video, so hopefully I'm well prepared and I'll represent his arguments well. And I'm glad we both have some presentations to show the audience. So hopefully, regardless of how we do, the audience will learn something from this. So thanks.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. One thing I forgot to mention, because I kind of forget about these, there will be super chats coming in, and since people are donating, I will take time to highlight those. Now, if those are questions or rhetorical ones, they'll probably like us. What I think I should let everybody know. Well, I think I told everybody just to wait until we get into the Q&A thing, and I'll kind of flag that for everybody. If you want a question on there, if you have questions for them, we'll wait until the towards the end of the presentation. But if you do drop a super chat, I probably will highlight it just in case, because that's kind of what the point of the super chat is. So yeah, Floyd and Stanley, please don't let those distract you. Probably highlight those real quick and then drop them off. But other than that, I'll try to keep any of the other ones out of the way while you guys are giving your presentations. So, all right, with that said, intros are out of the way. Stanley will be going first with his presentation. Stanley, whenever you're ready.
So start the time once I have my presentation up and ready to go. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, so here is my presentation. It's called the Sabbath 7-Day Cycle Challenge, the proof of Jesus being sovereign over all nations. So why do we adhere to a 7-day week? So my first challenge to Floyd is my proposition stipulates that the 7-day cycle serve as a reminder of the authorship of all creation, an everlasting memorial of the God of the Hebrews. All things considered, since the 7-day week is totally arbitrary, it is incumbent on my interlocutor to provide his reasons for its universal adherence. So I'm going to be appealing to Scripture as my primary document, and specifically Genesis 2 verses 1 to 3, which states, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day," making mention of the 7th day, "God ended his work," talking about his work that he had made. "And he Sabbath," the word is not rest, it's Sabbath, which means to cease in the Hebrew. "He Sabbath on the 7th day from all his work which he had made." Again, his work. "And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because it is because that in he has Sabbath from all his work which God created and made." So I'm going to need a primary source that Mr. Floyd is appealing to demonstrate any ancient civilization made reference to a 7-day cycle. Well, let's go to my next point, because I think I addressed that in my next point. So, no, give me a second here. I passed one. The 7. Okay, so challenge number 1, he has to explain to me, since the 7-day week is totally arbitrary, he has to explain the reason for its universal adherence. That being said, my argument is based on 2 infallible propositions. Number 1, the God of the Hebrews makes exclusive claims to the Sabbath, which is directly linked to the 7-day cycle. Note that all nations kept a different weekly cycle for the worship of their false gods. Secondly, the God of the Hebrews prophesied the universal application of the Sabbath, which is directly linked to the 7-day cycle, his sign from the Hebrew word oath, and the means by which he demonstrates his authority over all nations, whether earthly or heavenly, ipso facto rendering void the worship of the gods of the nations by the replacement of their weekly cycle. So it is incumbent on Floyd to argue against both propositions, and in order to do that, he will have to, challenge number 2, argue against the authorship of the 7-day cycle by citing any primary ancient source making reference to a 7-day recurrent cycle. So I'm not talking about they had 7 days for certain weeks. I need a recurrent 7-day cycle. So if he's able to meet that challenge, then more power to him. Challenge number 3, demonstrate historically the reason for its universal proliferation, since he must argue for human agency in order to compromise the integrity of my second pillar, by which I derive my conclusion. So failure to fulfill these two preconditions would result in him losing this debate. So when I say I will become an atheist, if I lose the debate, this is how we will determine who has won the debate, because he has to address these 2 points in order to invalidate my argument. That being said, I will be appealing to Ezekiel 20:12, which says, and moreover, also my Sabbath I gave to them to be a sign from the Hebrew word. Give me a second, please. I apologize once more. Yes, thank you, and I appreciate that. Sorry for the inconvenience. So let's go back to the presentation. So I'm appealing to Ezekiel 20:12, which says, and moreover, also my Sabbath I gave to them. Notice it's in the past tense. He gave it in the past tense to be a sign from the Hebrew word oath, between me and them, that they might know knowledge that I am Yahweh, the creator of heaven and the earth and everything in it, who sanctified them. So notice that it says he gave his Sabbath, which is also the feast days, but I'm going to be arguing for the 7-day Sabbath as a sign, which means a signature of his authorship of creation. So let's go to the next. No, sorry. So let's go to Ezekiel 20:20 now. And it says, and my Sabbath will be holy, and a sign, again from the Hebrew word oath, between me and you, that you may know knowledge that I am Yahweh your God. So notice here it says they will be, the Sabbath will be, a future tense. And consider the fact that when Ezekiel is writing this prophecy, Israel was already in exile. So Israel was not a nation when this was written. So he's referring to something in the future, that the Sabbath, which is directly linked to the 7-day cycle, will be a sign between him, God, and Israel. And to add on to the point I was making about Israel being scattered, we go to Deuteronomy 4:27, which says, and will scatter Yahweh you among the peoples, the Gentiles, and you will be left few in number among the nations where you where Yahweh will drive you. So basically, notice that they will be exiled or scattered amongst the nations. So in other words, in order for Ezekiel 20:20 to be fulfilled, he would have to submit all nations to a 7-day cycle, because there is no keeping the Sabbath without a 7-day cycle. And consider Deuteronomy 30:3, where it says Yahweh will bring back Israel from captivity. And notice it says, and gather you from all the nations where he has scattered you. So in order to understand how God intends to regather Israel, we must consider one of his distinguishing features by which he can identify them. So who is the Israel of God? Let's consider Psalms 87:3-7, where it says, glorious things are spoken to you, O city of God. The city of God, according to scripture, is the Son of God when he projects his light on earth. So from heaven all the way down, wherever the parameter of that light is, there's the city of God. When you compare Isaiah 60:14, Jeremiah 23:6, and Jeremiah 33:16. So, and he says, I will make mention of Rahab, who is Egypt, Babylon, to them that know me, and Philistia, Tyre, and Ethiopia. And they will say, they were born in that city. And it says, and of Zion it shall be said, this and that man was born in her. Being born according to Christian doctrine, the Holy Spirit. Once you're born of the Holy Spirit, you're part of the commonwealth of Israel, as per Exodus 12, verse 48 and 49. And the highest himself shall establish her. The Lord shall count, Yahweh shall count, when he's written up the people, that this man was born in her. So notice that Gentiles will be incorporated inside of Israel, being considered as members of the Commonwealth of Israel. To add to that, let's consider Isaiah 14:1, where it says, for I will have mercy, Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob, and will still choose Israel and settle them in their own land, and will be joined the strangers, the Gentiles, with them, and they will cling to the house of Jacob. So again, notice who are the Israel, those who keep the Sabbath and who believe in the three persons of the Godhead. As per Matthew 16, where God establishes the church, saying that you have to believe in his nature, who he is. So What does the Sabbath have to do with the Gentiles being incorporated into the spiritual Israel? Well, let us consider Acts 15, verses 14 to 17. And Simeon had declared how God at first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. So speaking about the Gentiles, and to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written, after this I will return and I will build again the tabernacle of David. So notice how the tabernacle of David consists of having Jew and Gentiles in them, which is fallen down, and I will build them again, the ruins thereof, and I will set it up. That is that the residue of man, talking about all nations, all people, might seek after Yahweh, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, says Yahweh, who does all these things. So again, notice that the spiritual Israel consists of Gentiles as well. Now, Acts 15 was referring to the prophets. So now let's cross-reference Acts 15 with Amos 9, verses 9 to 11. And it says, for lo, I will command and I will shift the house of Israel among all nations. Let's go to verse 11. And in that day, I will raise up the tabernacle of David. So we see again the tabernacle of David being mentioned. That is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof. And I will raise up its ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old. Now, let's cross-reference that also with another prophet who is basically making reference to the same prophecy, but he will add some information that is very interesting as it relates to my argument. We go to Isaiah 58, verse 12 to 14. And verse 12, it says, and they that shall be of you shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundation of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. So making reference again to the tabernacle of David, using 4 Hebrew words that is also mentioned in Amos 9, verse 9 to 11. Verse 13, and thou, if you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your own pleasure. So notice now a big a link that is added, or more insight is given as to how Israel will be incorporated in how the Gentiles, will be incorporated inside of the spiritual Israel if they keep the 7-day Sabbath again. So, and then verse 14 says, then shalt thou delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken this. So again, notice how the Sabbath is directly linked to the prophecy of Amos 9, verses 9 to 11, the tabernacle of David being restored, as is also stipulated in Acts 15, speaking about the Gentiles who were keeping the Sabbath as per Acts 15, verse 21. So in continuation with my train of thought, let's consider Isaiah 56, verse 6 and 7. And it says, also to the sons of the stranger, talking about Gentiles, that join themselves to the Lord, and to serve him, and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servant, and everyone that keeps the Sabbath. Again, the Sabbath is being mentioned, and the Sabbath is always directly linked to the 7-day cycle. From polluting it and taking hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain. So making reference to the future, talking about the kingdom to come. So in order for this to be fulfilled, then every nation where the Israel has been scattered to has to be submitted to a 7-day cycle. And it continues, and make them joyful in my house of prayer, and their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. So to continue, since the Sabbath, let me see if I didn't. Okay, so yeah. So since Sabbath keeping depends on the adherence to a 7-day week, God must first submit all nations to the cycle in order for these prophecies to be fulfilled. All right. So note that only Israel adhered to a 7-day week 2,000 years ago, when Jesus stated in Matthew 12:8, for the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day. So what can we extract from this statement is that the fact that Jesus was declaring the sign of his sovereignty, given the fact that the 7-day cycle is directly linked to the Sabbath. Hence, wherever it is, there also is the sphere of his authority. So how can Jesus be sovereign over all nations if only one nation adhered to the 7-day week 2,000 years ago? Well, the narrative of Scripture actually explains that in Deuteronomy 32, verse 8, according to the Greek Septuagint, that God divided the nations amongst the angels of God. And when it's talking about the angels of God, it's talking about the fallen angels, those who had rebelled against God, once you compare that with Psalms 82. And and once we continue reading Deuteronomy 32, verse 9, and it says, but God's portion is his people, Jacob, and he made Israel his inheritance, which is very important. So basically, the point of me addressing this is that all nations were given to the fallen angels. That's the reason why they kept a different weekly cycle than the 7-day cycle, which was instituted for the worship of them. And God said he would have Israel, his people, as his portion, his inheritance. And it is by the means of Israel being scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, he would submit all nations to his will, showing that he is God of all gods. So the 7-day week is the proof of his sovereignty. We see that in Exodus 15:17, if I'm not mistaken, it says Yahweh shall reign forever and ever. Notice it says shall reign. So I want to make it clear that God is the owner of the earth, but he has leased the nations to the fallen angels. So when it says he shall reign, it's talking about he shall submit all nations and the gods of the nations by replacing their weekly cycle with his 7-day cycle. And we can see that in Psalms 24, verse 1, where it says, it clearly stipulates the earth belongs to God. So now that being said, how do we know that Messiah would fulfill this prophecy? Well, once we consider, what is this again? Psalms 2, verses 2 to 8. Let's see what it says, so we can glean what we to see what we can glean from it. It says, the kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. So it's talking about the Father and the Messiah, Jesus Christ, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. So this is talking about a future prophecy which Jesus Christ fulfilled by being regathered to his divine estate, as per John 17:5, being at the right hand of the Father. And it says in Psalms 110, verse 1 and 5, that he will submit all nations to his will. And specifically, as it relates to that, I'm using the 7-day cycle argument to demonstrate that this has been fulfilled. And it continues by saying, he that sitteth in heaven shall laugh. Okay, we'll go to verse 6. Yet I have set my king upon my holy hill Zion, and I will declare the decree. The Lord has said unto me, thou art my son. This day I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I shall give you the Gentiles for your inheritance, the othermost parts of the earth for your possession. So when it says in Exodus 17:15 that Yahweh will reign, it's talking about the Son of God coming on earth and subjugating all people to his will once he has been regathered to his original estate. So, and notice that I have on the right side a picture of the French calendar, the Republican calendar during the so-called L'Âge de la Raison, when they rebelled against God, and they themselves understood that the 7-day cycle was a direct, how can I say, the creation, directly linked to the creation account. So to remedy this problem, they changed the 7-day cycle to a 10-day cycle. So the very roots of atheism understood the implication of the 7-day cycle, knowing that it was a testimony or a memorial of the God of creation, referring back to Genesis, the Genesis account. So we have here the law of cause and effect. Isaiah 66:19, where it says, I will set my sign among them. So again, same Hebrew word oath, making reference to the Sabbath. And I will send those that escape of them unto the nations, and they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles, as I'm doing right now with you people, showing you the glory of God, being able to subjugate all reality to his will. And we see it culminates in Isaiah 66:23, which is the passage I build my whole case upon. It shall come to pass, future tense, from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another shall all flesh come to worship me, says Yahweh, which again it relates to his sovereignty over all nations. So we can go to, I'm almost done here. We can go to Hebrews 1:3, which continues to build on the case I'm presenting today. And it says, who being the brightness of his glory, talking about the Son of God, and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the power of his word. So notice there that the word of God has power to subjugate all reality. And if you believe in gravity, you must believe in Jesus as God as well. Since Einstein's general relativity model for gravity replaced that of Isaac Newton, since he made a novel prediction on the gravitational deflection of light around the sun. In a similar sense, the 7-day cycle proof is consistent with the novel predictive process, since Jesus prophesied the universal application of the 7-day cycle as a demonstration of his power over all nations. Although we don't see gravity, we can observe the effects which testify of its reality. Likewise, we don't see the power of God manifestly submitting all nations to a 7-day cycle, yet their adherence to it is proof enough of its reality. So, in conclusion, my interlocutor will have to respond reasonably to these specific challenges. Challenge number 1. Since the 7-day cycle is arbitrary, why is it universally adopted in light of the fact that every nation kept a different cycle for their cultural and religious purposes? For cultural and religious purposes, basically for worship. Challenge number 2. Produce any primary ancient source that makes claim to the 7-day cycle. Let me repeat. Produce any primary ancient source that makes claim to the 7-day recurrent cycle before the Hebrews. Challenge number 3. Produce your historical evidence that the 7-day cycle came through human agency. And challenge number 4. Explain how the Hebrew scriptures' prediction of the universality of the 7-day cycle is insufficient to prove God, given the fact that he testified that it would be the sign of his authority over all nations. So basically, this is what he's going to have to do. I have served you guys with the Delicieux, and his failure to respond to these 4 challenges will be a means to gauge who has won this debate. So thank you very much again for your attention. I'm waiting to see what Floyd has to present to us, and let's see how we engage with the information that's been provided so far. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Stanley. That was just a little over 20 minutes, given that you had to take some time off when you got interrupted by the phone call. So with that, we're now going to move on to the negative position. That's going to be Floyd FP. Floyd, whenever you're ready, and if you've got a screen to share, go ahead and throw that up, and I'll get it on there for you.
I'll share it now. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. Window. There we go. All right, let me know when you can see that.
Yep, I can see it, and I've got it up there.
All right, great. All right. Okay, so does the 7-day week prove the Christian God's authority over the world? I will be taking the negative position. This is Stanley's challenge. I'll probably ask you, Stanley, to put up your 4 challenges there. These are the 2 claims that you had on your video, which you did present in your presentation. So I think it is relevant. So these are the 2 claims that you made. One is the God of the Hebrews makes exclusive claims to the Sabbath, which is directly linked to the 7-day cycle. And 2, the Hebrews refer to their God as being the one predicting the universal application of the 7-day cycle as a demonstration of his authority over all nations. So this presentation is going to address these 2 claims that you made. All right, so the first one, Yahweh's exclusive claim to the Sabbath. In the Hebrew Tanakh, which is the Hebrew Bible, it offers 2 reasons why the biblical God wants his people to honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. One is found in Exodus 20. It's a cosmological reason. He says, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." But in Deuteronomy 5, he offers a different reason. He offers a humanitarian reason. He says, you shall remember that you were a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Why it follows that God removed them from slavery, that they should keep the Sabbath day, I'm not sure. But these are the two basic reasons that God gives them for keeping the Sabbath. One is because he created the universe within 6 days and rested, and that he freed them from bondage out of Egypt. So the question is this exclusive to the Hebrew, to the Jewish religion? Well, no, it's not. Other cultures had rest days. The Babylonians had rest days on the 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, as well as other cultures. The Babylonians named 7 days of the week after the 7 known celestial entities, namely the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The Jewish word Shabbat is like the Assyrian Sabbatu, meaning a day of rest for the heart. It is unclear on why the Babylonians chose a 7-day week, but theories are the 7 known celestial entities, the 4 phases of the moon, and also the number of stars and constellations, like the Big Dipper and so forth. Or it could be a combination of all three. Humans look for patterns. They see 777. They're looking for heavenly signs. So, these would be the heavenly signs in which they would pick a 7-day week. So it is circular reasoning to appeal to the Bible as the origin of the 70-day weekly cycle, since you are assuming the claims of the Bible about the world's origins are the only correct ones. So let's go into the Hebrew calendar. The Hebrew calendar was derived from the Babylonian calendar. It's a lunisolar calendar where each month started with the observation of a new moon. Because the moon cycle is 29.53 days long, 1 or 2 days are added to the final week of each month. There are 12 lunar months in a solar year, beginning with each new moon marked by the Rosh Chodesh holiday. And before the creation of the fixed Hebrew calendar, largely attributed to Hillel II in the 4th century CE, an extra 13th month was added to the year based on harsh environmental issues, such as the barley fields or fruit not yet aviv, ripened. So in other words, in the last 12th month, if the harvest wasn't ready, if the crops weren't ready to be harvested, they had to add on a 13th month and wait. So you can see how the number 13 was unlucky for them back then. Stanley is looking for a human explanation for the 70 week, as well as the other things within Judaism. Well, Judaism basically evolved from paganism. Critical scholars believe that the Israelites were Canaanites who migrated from the Canaanite coastal plains to the interior around 1250 BCE. The Hebrew language is a subgroup of the Canaanite languages, which is a subgroup of the Northwest Semitic languages. Seasonal festivals were recontextualized with mythical Jewish origins. For example, the Passover was originally a shepherd's feast, the Feast of Fistlings, when you would sacrifice the firstborn lambs in gratitude to your god, namely a moon god, for a good bearing of sheep. The Phoenician harvest festival of the unleavened bread practiced at Passover is another example. The first sheaves were carried to the altar at the Feast of Passover, which was on the first full moon of the year. The Sumerian Day of Atonement, Kupara, became Yom Kippur. So the date markers and festivals are centered around moon phases and times of harvest. So basically, the Jews coming from this culture of Canaanites took the festivals that they were familiar with and recontextualized and made it their own. So that's where these things come from. Okay, so let's look at Genesis 1. That describes the creation account as 6 days, where one of the reasons that the Bible gives for the Sabbath. Genesis 1 is from the priestly peace source, which was written at the time of the Babylonian exile, from 586 BCE to 435 BCE. The authors derived their story from earlier creation myths to demythologize an epic battle between a god and one or more chaos sea dragons to create the world. It is natural philosophy rather than mythology, where it rationalizes an older mythology to explain how the Bible God created the world. The 6 days of work and 1 of rest reflects the ancient Babylonian creation epic called the Enuma Elish, when on high. The 6 days of creation in the Genesis story parallel the 6 generations of gods in the Enuma Elish myth. Marduk, a 6th generation god, creates man and finally allows the gods to rest. Similarly, God, Elohim, makes man on the 6th day, and he himself rests, possibly with his angels, who, in honoring the supreme God, hold a similar position to the Mesopotamian deities in relation to Marduk. Pagan influences on the 7 days. The 7 days are named after the 7 known planetary gods, which were considered to be the wanderers, and different cultures had different gods for these planetary gods that they experienced up in the sky. And here's an example: Roman, Germanic, Greek, and Babylonian. That's where the concept of 7 heavens comes from. They believe there are 7 layers of heaven with each god on each layer. Did the Jews actually have these sort of gods? Well, yes, actually they did. They had 7 archangels. I listed them here. You will find some of these archangels in the Tanakh, but you're going to have to go to extra biblical sources to locate them all. One example is Enoch 20. Also, Josephus in his Jewish Wars gives a description of the Jewish temple, where he writes, "Now the 7 lamps signify the 7 planets, for so many they were springing out of the candlestick. Now the 12 loaves that were upon the table signified the circle of the zodiac and the year." Imagine that the monotheistic Judaism recognized the importance of the zodiac. We have to be careful and note, though, that one thing that was unique about the Jewish culture is they did not name their days after gods. Rather, they had generic names, simply day 1, day 2, day 3, up to the Sabbath day. So that was unique with the Jewish culture. And I think because they became strictly monotheistic during the Babylonian exile, so they didn't want to name their days after gods. But that doesn't always hold in Jewish culture, which I will show later. So what about today? He talked about God controlling the world today. Well, what do we see today? Well, today's in the Western world, the English day names they're named after Roman and Norse gods. In the United States, we have Sunday, we have Moon Day, Tears Day, Woden's Day, Thor's Day, Frigg's Day, and Saturn's Day. That's what our days are named after. Pagan influences on the 12 months. The 12 Gregorian months are taken from the Julian calendar, which came from Rome. Julian, obviously, Julius Caesar. The Jewish month names are largely taken from the Babylonian names. And the Jewish authorities admit this themselves. For example, in the Jerusalem Talmud, Rabbi Hanina said, the month names came up from them with the exiles from Babylon. So again, the Jewish authorities admit that their month names comes from Babylon. Here's a list of Babylonian months compared to Hebrew months. Now I'm not going to read these all, but you can see how the Hebrew months came from Babylonia. I will point out one example though, which I think really stands out, and that's month 4. Month 4 is named Tammuz in the Jewish calendar. Tammuz, that might sound familiar to you. Who's Tammuz? Tammuz is a Mesopotamian deity. Imagine that, the monotheistic Judaism actually having one of their months named after a foreign god. Who would imagine that? And also, some of their days mentioned in the Tanakh were actually renamed after the Babylonian exile. Why? Because they were influenced by Babylon. So I give a list of 4 here, or I'll just cite one. Aviv became Nisan. I'm sorry, not Nisan. Nisan. I apologize. It's pronounced Nisan, not Nisan. So clearly there was a Babylonian influence on Jewish culture, and especially to name one of their names after a Mesopotamian god. Okay, now I'm going to go to the second claim now. Does the whole world observe the Sabbath? Well, many Christians observe the Lord's Day on Sunday and not the Jewish Shabbat. So even Christians, which are in the billions, don't observe the Jewish Sabbath. The Jewish Shabbat is observed from sundown Friday night until sundown Saturday night. Most of the world follows the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar is a solar calendar, where the Hebrew calendar is a lunisolar calendar. The Gregorian is the standard of the Geneva-based International Organization for Standardization, IOS 8601. The current state of Israel also uses Gregorian alongside the Jewish calendar. A secular day begins at midnight, where a Jewish day begins at sundown. The secular New Year starts January 1st, where the Jewish Rosh Hashanah is celebrated on the first day of Tishri, which is mid-September, and also the first day of Nisan, which is in March or April. So just to pick example of today, today is Friday, July 8th, 2022. It's after sunset in the East Coast where I am. In Israel, that is Tammuz 10, year 5782. So again, the world is not following that. And some Christians don't observe the Sabbath at all. They'll recite verses such as Colossians 2:16 through 17, where it says, "Let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regards to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath. These are a shadow of things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ." The whole world, again, does the whole world observe the Sabbath? Well, the world's becoming more secular, particularly in the West. Blue laws are less prevalent. On Sunday now, you can buy alcohol. There are sporting and entertainment events. Retail stores are open and so forth. Here's an old poster of a blue law in Ontario of things prohibited. You couldn't gamble. They didn't have shows. A lot of the stores were closed. And just a couple decades back in my area, liquor stores were closed and a lot of retail stores were closed and so forth. All that's changing. So I don't see that as giving respect to the Bible God. And you mentioned the 7-day cycle being arbitrary. And I agree. I totally agree. I would think something more substantial is where God shows his demonstration over the world is the fulfillment of the Messianic age, which hasn't occurred yet. The Messianic age is supposed to bring the Messiah, which is a wise and righteous descendant of David who will rule Israel as king. The world will be changed into a utopia of universal peace and knowledge of the Jewish God, living according to the teaching of his Torah, and will be the ideal example for living for all nations. The Jewish people will return to their ancestral homeland. The Jewish temple will be rebuilt. The world will destroy their weapons of war and enter into an age of eternal peace and knowledge of God. None of that had happened. I think that would be a better sign than the arbitrary 7 days. And the New Testament itself makes more of a claim that Satan is in control of the world now, not God. The New Testament describes an apocalyptic age where the present age is ruled by evil powers. The end of the present age will happen in the very near future, and the transition will happen quickly, and the age to come will be ruled by God. And there's various verses to back this up. For example, 2 Corinthians 4:4, it says, in this case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers. May interpret the God of this world to be Satan. And in fact, in 1 John 5, it says, the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. And in the Gospel of Matthew, the devil himself tempts Jesus. It says, he showed him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, and said to him, all these things I will give to you if you fall down and worship me. So that implies Satan was in control of all the kingdoms of the world. So his claim is basically unfalsifiable when you look at it. It says, by claiming that the 7-day cycle being practiced around the world is proof of the Bible God, and then claim where it isn't practiced, it is Satan trying to stop it, and makes your hypothesis an unfalsifiable conspiracy theory. Any evidence that one brings is simply part of that conspiracy. So in other words, if the 7-day cycle is practiced, that is a sign of God's sovereignty over the world. If the 7-day cycle isn't practiced, like you mentioned in France, this is a sign of Satan trying to fight against it. All right, so in summary, other cultures have 7-day weekly cycles and rest days that did not originate from Jewish culture. The Jewish calendar is derived from the Babylonian calendar, which I showed. The Jewish culture evolved from other cultures, not the reverse. The modern world follows standards that do not align with ancient Jewish date and time practices, nor observes or honors the Sabbath beyond the 7-day weekly cycle. The modern world is adopting international standards as global travel, business, and communication increase and continually adjust, and is continually adjusted for pragmatic reasons. And other biblical prophecies have not come true. And lastly, every religion offers ideological myths to explain human origins. It is simply special pleading to claim that my religion offers the true origin stories. All right, that's the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Floyd. Okay, so with that, presentations have concluded, and the timer's going off. Floyd, you got in just under the 20-minute mark. So, all right, so you guys had agreed for 10-ish minutes of rebuttal. So, Stanley, you will be going first whenever you're ready, and your 10 minutes of rebuttal start now.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. There was some valid information mixed in with a lot of speculation and a whole bunch of things that's irrelevant to my argument. So let us address, again, let me stipulate the 4 points I said that he needs to address, the 4 challenges. And if he doesn't, he will, by that, have lost the debate. Number 1, give me a second here. Challenge number 1, since the 7-day cycle is arbitrary, why is it universally adopted in light of the fact that every nation kept a different cycle for cultural and religious purposes? That's number 1. Challenge number 2, produce any primary ancient source that makes claims to the 7-day recurrent cycle before the Hebrews. Challenge number 3, produce your historical evidence that the 7-day cycle came through human agency. And challenge number 4, explain how the Hebrew scriptures prediction of the universality of the 7-day cycle is insufficient to prove God, given the fact that he testified that it will be the sign of his authority over all nations. So let's go step by step, and let me address the points that are relevant and the points that I can remember. Challenge number 1. Since the 7-day cycle is totally arbitrary, why is it universally adopted in light of the fact that every nation kept a different cycle for cultural and religious purposes? Did he address that? No. He said it was arbitrary, and as if this was somehow militating against my argument. No, the fact that it's arbitrary only confirms this prophecy, since you cannot find this in nature. And most of his examples of so-called of these calendars, these ancient calendars, were based on cosmology, but the 7-day cycle is not, as I clearly stipulated in Genesis 1-7, because the moon wasn't created until the fourth day, so it had nothing to do with a lunar cycle. The 7-day cycle has nothing to do with a lunar cycle. The monthly Sabbaths has to do with a lunar cycle, and that's not part of my argument. It's totally irrelevant to my argument. You have to argue against the 7-day cycle, not the monthly cycles. I don't understand why you would even refer me to a whole presentation on a lunar cycle when the 7-day cycle is not predicated on the cycle of the moon. But you did establish that different nations, ancient nations, civilization did depend on the lunar cycle, which I'll address in my second challenge that you did not respond to. I asked you to produce any primary ancient source that makes claims to the 7-day recurrent cycle before the Hebrews. And he did concede the point that Babylon kept a 7-day week for the first 3 weeks and added 1 or 2 extra days, which is not a 7-day recurrent cycle. So I don't understand why he would bring that that fact to our attention and then try to build on a case on that. You're just confirming my position, not militating against it. So I don't understand why you would refer me to the Babylonians. And I would like to correct you on your claims about Babylon. First of all, the Sabbath that you claim refers to a rest. I made it clear that the Hebrew word is it has nothing to do with rest. It has to do with cessation, ceasing from all his work. So you cannot compare the narrative according to the Babylonian creation account to the Genesis account, because God does not rest, and it makes it that clear in Isaiah 48. So already there you've shown there's a distinguishing factors that separate the Genesis account from the Babylonian account. You also suggested that the 7-day cycle was somehow based on different stars and this, that, and third. Deuteronomy 4 makes it clear that we're not to worship the star, moon, and the sun, the constellations, as opposed to the Babylonian understanding of these stars representing gods. Now, it's consistent with the Hebrew scriptures that we also say that are associated with false gods, but the Hebrew scriptures clear the command of God contravenes this very notion that we are to acknowledge these false deities. So if you're saying the Hebrew scriptures was somehow influenced by Babylonian tales, why would God explicitly say not to do the same thing as the pagans? So already there, you're contradicting yourself and again, validating my position. What else did he say about Babylon? Babylon, he suggested a lunar cycle is 29.5 days. For you to suggest that, you consider the fact that in order for the Babylonians to be consistent with the cycle of the moon, they would have to add extra days to the last week. So again, that's not a recurrent cycle. So you failed my second challenge. You said a whole bunch of other things about Babylon, and I'm hopefully you'll be able to refresh my memory and ask me those questions during our cross-examination. So you failed challenge number 1. You did not explain why the 7-day cycle, which is arbitrary, why it is universally adopted in light of the fact that all nations kept a different cycle for cultural and religious purposes. You did not respond. You conceded the fact that there's no primary source that makes claims to a 7-day cycle, recurrent cycle before the Hebrews. So you fell there. Challenge number 3 is to produce your historical evidence that the 7-day cycle came through human agency. Now, you spoke about the name of the weeks of the days, or somehow the 7-day cycle is somehow influenced by the Gregorian calendar. First of all, the 7-day cycle predates the Gregorian calendar. That's number 1. Number 2, Rome adopted a 7-day cycle before the Gregorian calendar. It was called the Julian calendar. Number 3, the Gregorian calendar, the 7-day cycle was already instituted in Rome before it became so-called Christianity. Number 4, the Gregorian calendar is not universal, but the 7-day cycle is. So showing that the 7-day cycle is superior than the Gregorian calendars, since the Gregorian calendar cannot account for why the 7-day cycle is universal. If you're saying the Gregorian calendar is the reason why we have a 7-day week, why is it the Gregorian calendar is not universal? For example, Iran, Ethiopia, and Afghanistan don't keep a Gregorian calendar, but they do adhere to a 7-day week, so it cannot account for why they keep a 7-day week. And you also talk about the week of the days, which is, again, not universal, which I responded to by suggesting in Deuteronomy 32, verse 8, that God allowed the fallen angels to rule the earth for a moment, for a time, for a precise time. But those names are not universal. They're not, there's many nations that do not adhere to those names. For example, Israel doesn't do it. Every Arab nation doesn't do it. So that only proves my point that the God of the Hebrews is sovereign over all nations, while the false god had power over certain nations, which the Hebrew scriptures account for by stipulating that he allowed the fallen angels to have sovereignty over certain areas. So it's totally. I don't see how you are. Your claim of the 7-day cycle being influenced by the Gregorian calendar, it doesn't meet the standard. So you failed challenge number 3. What else did you say about the Gregorian calendar? You said something else. You said somehow, well, that's not even part of the debate, suggesting that Satan rules the earth. I did say in Psalms 24, verse 1, that God owns the earth, and he leased it, as I said in Deuteronomy 32, verse 8, to the fallen angels for a certain period of time. And he would use Israel to conquer the whole earth, since Israel will be scattered through the 4 corners of the earth. And he would submit all nations to a 7-day week for them to keep the Sabbath, which is the sign of his authority over all nations. So the fact that he suggested France didn't keep the 7-day cycle, didn't keep the 7-day cycle, they keep it now. The fulfillment of the prophecy took place from 2,000 years ago, and the domino effect until the last nation, the USSR, in the 1940s. So I don't understand why you would suggest that France keeping a 10-day cycle militates against my argument, when I made it clear that he sat at the right hand of, once he reascended back to his divine estate, and he began submitting all nations to his will. So we saw the domino effect from 2,000 years till now. So it has been fulfilled now. Nobody could go against it now, showing that Satan is no longer ruling over any nation. It's Jesus Christ that's ruling. The verses that you appeal to was talking about during the time of Paul 2,000 years ago. I didn't say the 7th cycle was universal 2,000 years ago. My argument is that every nation will be submitted, future tense, to the 7-day cycle as a sign of its authority. So I don't understand why you would even bring this up in the discussion. But you'll get your chance to engage me with that. And last challenge, explain how the Hebrew scriptures' prediction of the universality of the 7-day cycle is insufficient to prove God, given the fact that he testified that it will be the sign of his authority over all nations. You presented my 2 propositions, but you try to suggest my argument, trying to straw man my argument, suggesting that my argument is on the basis of the 7-day cycle specifically. No, it's not. The predictive part, which you did not address, and then you try to divert people's attention away from the matter at hand. I'm not here to debate any other prophecies. We could do that on a different day. We're here to debate this. The title of discussion is quite clear. Is the 7-day cycle proof of the authority of Jesus Christ? So every so-called prophecy you believe hasn't been fulfilled is totally irrelevant to our debate right now. You have to address the 7-day cycle. The predictive part of my argumentation. It was predicted, antecedent to its fulfillment, showing that it is a prophecy. Number two, you have to militate against universality, the fact that it's arbitrary. Why is it universal, given the fact that all nations kept a different cycle? You haven't addressed that. And the fact that he testifies saying, this is my sign, Ezekiel 20, verse 12, past tense. This is my sign that I am Yahweh, the creator. Verse 20 in Ezekiel, it will be my sign. You didn't address none of that. And you've seen my video, so you should have been prepared to address the point. And you have failed miserably to address my 4 points. And by that, I could say you have lost the debate. But we're going to have a chance to have a cross examination, to speak, or open dialogue. And hopefully you will be able to address my points then. If I didn't address certain of your points, it's because either it was irrelevant to the discussion, I even addressed certain points which were irrelevant, or I forgot about it, and you'll have your chance to refresh my memory. But thank you very much for your attention. You failed the four challenges I stipulated, and by that I could say I won the debate. But we'll see what you can do during the cross-examination. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Floyd, your rebuttal can begin now. Oh, you're still muted, Floyd.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Stanley, if you don't mind, could you pull up your slide with your 4 challenges so I could address them? If you only address one at a time, if you pull them up, I'll take a screenshot of it, and I can, I'll be able to go to each one, because that's what you want me to do. So I'll do that for you. All right, great. Let me see if my snipping tool here will work. All right, got it. All right, thank you. You can unshare. Great. So, one thing you talked about the recurring 7-day cycle. Well, the Babylonians did have recurring 7-day cycle. When I talk about adding days at the end, that's adding the days to the end of the month, and it's the same thing as that in the Jewish calendar. It's no different. Let me pull up the Hebrew calendar real quick. I'll share it real quick. So, whoops. Don't quite see it. Try again. Share. Oh, there we are. Yeah, so here's the Hebrew calendar. Each month is different. Why? Because 7 times 4 is 28, right? But a lunar cycle is longer than 28. It's 29.53, so forth. So not just the Babylonians, but the Jewish people themselves, they had to add 1 or 2 days on. Also, they have to add leap years and so forth. And we still do that today. We have leap years in the Gregorian calendar. And as well, there's something called a leap second. I think we did a leap second back in 2016 because the solar calendar, the moon cycles and so forth, they're not exact. So we're constantly tweaking it. So it's no different. The Babylonian and Jewish calendar, they add on days to the end of the month. Remember, a month is the start of a new moon. So, and that's not 28 days. So it's not 7 times 4. It's not, each week is recurring 7 days, but the months are, they have to add on days. So that's what I was talking about there. So it's no different. Babylon and Jewish, it's exactly the same. You talked about how it proliferated through human agency. Well, one reason why it proliferated is Constantine. Constantine in year 321 adopted the 7-day from basically Christianity and spread it out. The Romans used to do 8-day. The 8th day was for basically shopping, but he adopted it and spread it. because he just got in control and spread it on. So I don't think anything remarkable there. You ask about other oranges. Well, I gave them. The 7 days are named after the 7 planetary gods. And even in the Jewish temple, which you didn't address, they have 7 lamps for each planet. Why would they have that in the Jewish temple? Please explain that to me. Other influences. You never addressed why the Jewish month Tammuz is named after a deity. You avoided that. You didn't address that at all. I'd like you to deal with that. You say Sabbath, the word Sabbath that they use doesn't mean rest. It means ceases and so forth. Well, it's the same thing. I mean, I'll pull up concordance. Yeah. I mean, perhaps God doesn't need a rest, but he stopped. And what do humans do on the Sabbath? Well, they stop their work and they rest. So it's meant to rest. Remember, the Sabbath is for humans to observe, right? So they're told to rest, not to work. That's what they do. I don't see any issue there. You talked about Einstein replacing Newton's gravitational theory. Well, the reason why is because Newton's theory didn't explain certain phenomena. It was incomplete, like the orbit of Mercury, for example. Einstein's theory better replaces that, but Einstein's theory is not perfect either. I think Einstein's theory of gravitation, the general theory of relativity, falls apart at the quantum level. So scientific models are just models. They're not perfect. And in fact, we still certain people still use the Newtonian model of gravitation because it's a simpler model. But Einstein's was just had better predictive power, but Einstein's theory is not perfect. So I don't think that's I don't think that point is good. Let me see. I did take a screenshot of your challenges. Let me see. Universality. Well, nations of cultures evolve and so forth. They share from each other. This way English is becoming more prevalent. We're becoming more of a global community. So we're going to share more and more concepts that, for pragmatic reasons, things work. Just like people are adopted the Gregorian calendar. Now, yeah, it's true that the 7-day cycle did not come from the Gregorian calendar, but I never said that. The Gregorian calendar is simply an evolution of dating standards, which does not honor the Sabbath. You talk about the Sabbath, being a sign. And one thing you ask, I'll ask you during the Q&A period, is you claim that it was predicted that it was actually predicted that the 7-day cycle would be a sign. I don't see that in Scripture. You point out how people would follow the Sabbath and stuff like that, but I don't see any clear examples that the whole world will adopt the 7-day cycle for that to be a sign. I would think other things in Jewish culture are more relevant, like the Masonic age, as well as other Bible prophecy. I don't see anything clear that's pointing out where let it be known that the whole world will bow down to the 7th-day cycle, and this is a sign of me. Again, and the 7-day cycle was before the Jewish culture. It didn't originate from them. I pointed that out. So I brought up 3 examples of how the 7-day cycle came about. So I didn't ignore that at all. I did point out the ancient sources. Babylon came from Samaria. Sumerian had the same 7-day cycle as well. Again, it's an evolution. It's an evolution of cultures. produced historical evidence of human agency. I did that. Constantine took it and he proliferated it out throughout the Roman Empire. Again, explain the Hebrew scripture prediction of the universality of the 7-day cycle. Again, it predicts the Messiah ruling over the world and Jewish culture and law proliferating, but we don't see that. Again, we don't see the Sabbath being universally honored. Again, there's other reasons why there's 7-day cycle, not because God declared it with the Sabbath. That's circular reasoning. Again, I think there's no clear scripture. I'll ask you in Q&A what clear scripture actually says it's a 7-day cycle. There's things about the Sabbath and stuff like that, but no 7-day cycle. In fact, you say I didn't address anything from your video, so let me pull up what you have on your video, which some of which you did address in your presentation here, but other ones you don't. For example, you said in Genesis 13:14 through 15 to Abraham by conquering the world by the sign of the 7-day cycle. I see nothing in Genesis 13:14 through 15 which says which mentions the 7-day cycle. It says that Abraham will get all that land that they see, but that didn't even happen. Does Abraham's descendants rule all the nations of the world? No, not at all. To Moses, demonstrating his power in Exodus 9 and 12. Again, I see nothing about the 7-day cycle here. Not even a mention of the Sabbath. To Ephraim, by leaving his sign on the Sabbath amongst the nations in order to provide Gentiles opportunity to join the covenant of Israel in Genesis 48:19. Again, I don't see anything regarding the 7-day cycle. And so to Isaiah, by submitting all nations to the 7-day cycle. This is what you did have in today's presentation, Isaiah 66:19, 21 through 23. It does mention, it says, for as the new heavens and the new earth, which I shall make remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your descendants and your name remain. For from new moon to new moon, from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship me, says the Lord. Well, there's nothing really applies the 7-day cycle here. It just basically said over all time, all flesh will worship before me. Well, that hasn't happened, and also you could say, okay, well, it mentions the Sabbath, but it also mentions the new moon. Well, why isn't the whole world following new moon festivals? The ancient Jews followed new moon festivals, but no one's following new moon festivals today. So again, you're just cherry picking verses here. I mean, I can look at Numbers 10, for example. It says, and your joyous occasions, your fixed festivals and new moon days, you shall sound the trumpets over your burnt offerings and your sacrifices of well-being. Well, do they do that today? No. Who does that today? I guess maybe some small Jewish communities might still do that, but the whole world doing that? No. How about Psalm 81:4? Blow the horn on the new moon or on the full moon of our feast day. So again, you point to Isaiah 66. It says from Sabbath to Sabbath, implying that people are going to follow each week Sabbath to Sabbath, but it also mentions new moon to new moon. And are people living by new moon and new moon? Well, they did that in the Jewish calendar because each month started with a new moon, but the Gregorian calendar is not a lunisolar calendar. It's a solar calendar. So that's not fulfilled. And I don't see any prediction here. It's not a prediction. And if it is prediction, people aren't following it. think that is everything. So yeah, just to say, I gave ancient primary sources of where the 7-day cycle came from. So I meant that challenge. So I think that's everything.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Floyd. I guess with that, we're going to go into this will be the open discussion period that you guys wanted. So hopefully you guys just, if I will step in if either one of you starts over talking the other too much or is not letting someone finish. But other than that, just kind of roll with it as best you can. At about this point, if anyone would like, I think what I'm going to do actually to make this fair, if you are, if you would like me to ask a question, highlight it to either Floyd or Mr. Delicieux, anyone in the live chat, I hope if you highlight it in there, I will do my best to snag them, make a list, and try to get to them as well. So, with that being said, if you want to do those, and actually tag me in the questions. Tag me at Jefferson Spatchcock, and then say question for Floyd, question for Stanley, and then put your question out there. And like I said, I'll do my best to collect those and then ask them once they've satisfied themselves in terms of a back and forth. So, all right, with that, I'm going to mute again and kind of concentrate on keeping an eye on any of those incoming questions. You guys, open discussion period begins now.
All right, Floyd, if you agree, I ask you a question, you ask me a question, and then we engage like that way. All right.
Yeah,
So you suggested you responded to my second challenge, which says produce any primary ancient source that makes claim to a 7-day recurrent cycle before the Hebrews. Now, you suggested that they added the Babylonians added an extra 1 or 2 days to the month. Is that a fact? Because I'm reading here from the encyclopedia of, let me see here, encyclopedia of religion and ethics, Pinch's 1919 in Hastings. So basically, and I'm repeating what it says here. It says the lunation of 29 to 30 days basically contain 3 7-day weeks and a final week of 8 or 9 days inclusive, breaking the continuous 7-day cycle. Now, I provided my source. Can you provide any source, ancient primary or secondary sources that suggest that didn't break the recurrent 7-day week?
Well, again, I show that they're following the same practice that the Jerusalem calendar, the Jewish calendar has. They're just extending out the last month because it was a lunar solar calendar. The new month started at the new moon, so they still kept the rest days on the 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, but they had extended days until the new moon came about, and the Jews did the same thing.
I'm just going to bring some clarification to my question, and you could ask. We should do it like that. Bring up one clarification, and we can move on. I didn't ask you about the new moon or worshiping on the 7, 14, 21, and 28. I agree with that. I put that in my my video. That's not the point I'm bringing here. Can you give me any source, a citation from your primary or second? Because I could go to the Numa Elish, tablet 5, verses 10 to 31. Doesn't say what you're saying, but let's keep it simple here. Give me any citation from any primary or secondary source that suggests that they did not break the cycle on the fourth week. Because I just quoted Hastings, Pinch's Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, makes it clear that they broke the 7-day week on the last week, adding an extra day or 2 to the week, not to the month. I need a citation or a source.
Well, again, I don't know. I'm just keeping repeating myself. They had a 7-day cycle. They named the planetary gods after them. Again, they had to add days that the Jewish people did as well, because a lunar cycle lasted longer than 28 days. So they needed to add extra days on, which the same thing. It's the difference in the Jews. I don't know how many times I need to repeat myself.
Okay, I'll let you ask the question.
Okay.
I just like to finalize by saying you didn't provide me a source. The Jews always kept a recurrent 7-day week. They didn't add an extra week to the last week, the fourth week. So I don't understand the link you're trying to make, but no problem. you failed my second challenge. Go ahead, ask me a question.
Okay, so where exactly in the Bible is there a clear prophetic prediction that the whole world will adopt this 7-day week? I don't see that.
Well, it was deductive reasoning. I provided multiple verses showing that the 7-day cycle is a sign, Ezekiel 20:12, for example. It was a sign to Israel, Ezekiel 20:20. It will be a sign to Israel, but guess what? When Ezekiel is making this prophecy, Israel is already scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. For them to be able to keep the Sabbath, they must have, the nations must be subject or must adopt a 7-day week. The fact that every nation 2,000 years ago, where Jesus Christ said, I am Lord of the Sabbath, no nation kept a 7-day cycle. And we see the proliferation from that, the domino effect from the time he said it, all the way to the USSR. So by deductive reasoning, I've established that this is a prophecy that Jesus will submit all nations to his will. And culminating with Isaiah 66:23, from Sabbath to Sabbath will all nation come to worship me. I didn't come here to establish the monthly Sabbaths because it's relevant to my argument. And the fact that people don't keep the right Sabbath, the 7-day cycle, or people are not keeping the Sabbath, I never claimed that to be part of my argument. Why? Because Isaiah 56 verse 6 and 7 says, those who keep the Sabbath will be brought to his holy mountain, making the cross reference between Isaiah 56 6 and 7 and Isaiah 66 being the fulfillment of that. And the fact that people don't keep the Sabbath doesn't militate against his sovereignty, because he could be Lord without your worship. Thank you.
Okay. But I think
you could ask some clarification, and then I ask my question.
Well, again, other cultures were practicing the 7-day week even before the Jews. Again, the Jewish culture is not the oldest culture. And again, the
is
Jews,
that a question?
Well, okay. Let's move on. Go ahead and answer.
No. Ask your question, and then you finalize, because that's what I did. I finalized with a conclusion. I finalized with a statement at the end. So clarify.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Ask me a question.
I just did.
Okay.
Basically, the Jewish culture came from other cultures. It was not reversed. The Jewish culture is not the oldest culture. They were former Canaanites. They were Canaanites. They came from Canaanite culture, which had the 7-day cycle to begin with. So
no.
Go ahead and answer.
A quick response to that. First of all, I'm not here to argue for the Jewish calendar or the Jewish culture. I'm here for the Hebrew God. I'm here to establish the Hebrew God, which predates Judah. So Judah is one of the tribes of Israel. I'm not here to argue for Israel. I'm here to argue for the God of Israel, from the very Genesis, from where he makes the claim to the 7-day week, saying that this is directly associated to my work creating the heavens and the earth, which you cannot find in any ancient primary source. You tried with the Babylonian 6,000 years. That's not a 7-day week, so I don't even know why you would go there.
Well,
so
again, these Jewish stories came from pre-existing stories.
That's a claim, speculation, but you haven't established that.
No, like the Noah story came from the Epic of Gilgamesh.
That's a claim. That's a claim.
The Epic of Gilgamesh was much older than the Noah story.
That's a claim. I could argue against.
There's two separate sources of the Noah story that are put together that contradict each other. I
could argue against that easily, but it's totally irrelevant to the topic of discussion, so I'm not even going to go there.
Well, it is totally relevant.
No, it's not. It has nothing to do with the 7-day week.
It's not the true origin of the 7-day cycle. I offered other alternatives to the origin of the 7-day cycle.
Can you give me the citation from the Epic of Gilgamesh that makes reference to a 7 recurrent day cycle?
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how the Jewish culture took previous stories and it made them own. That's how they took previous festivals and recontextualized it in their own society. That's what I was talking about. I'm not talking about the 7-day cycle there. Okay,
but since the topic of discussion is the 7-day cycle, I could respond to what you're saying, but that would be a deflection, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
It's relevant because it's showing where the origins of these concepts come from.
I don't see how it logically follow if I were to accept your claim, which is totally false, but if I were to accept your claim, it doesn't logically follow that the 7-day week was also extracted from other civilizations. So again, I'm not going down that rabbit hole. So another challenge I made to you, you felt challenge number 2 by not being able to provide any citation saying that they broke the 7-day recurrent cycle, the Babylonians, that you try to postulate for. How about challenge number 3? Produce your historical evidence that the 7-day cycle came through human agency. Now, is it my understanding that you're saying that the 7-day cycle was proliferated by Constantine? Can you explain to me how is that true when Rome was already adopting the 7-day cycle in the 1st century BC by adopting the Julian calendar? That's number 1. So basically, the 7-day cycle was already implemented in Rome in conjunction with the 8-day cycle before so-called Christianity. Number 1. Number 2, the Gregorian calendar is not universal, but the 7-day cycle is. So, and Rome did not make any predictions. So we'll leave the prediction for another my next challenge. So can you explain to me, if you're saying the 7-day cycle was proliferated by Constantine, explain to me why they adopted the 7-day cycle in the 1st century BC, the Julian calendar, and number 2, the fact that the Gregorian calendar is not universal, but the 7-day cycle is. And number 3, nations like Japan in the 8th century adopted the 7-day cycle, which had nothing to do with the Constantine or Western influence. Western influence came later on, and Japan was never colonized. So one example of a nation, Japan, adopting the 7-day cycle in the 8th century before Western influence. So 3 points. Number 1, 7-day cycle was already instituted 1st century BC in Rome before it became so-called Christianity. Number 2, the Gregorian calendar is not universal. Afghanistan, Iran, Ethiopia does not adopt a 7-day cycle. Adopt the Gregorian calendar, but they do adopt the 7-day cycle. So it cannot account for why the 7-day cycle is universal. And number 3, nations such as Japan, one example, adopted the 7-day cycle before Western influence. Please, in the 8th century.
Well, let me address the Gregorian calendar. I didn't say that the Gregorian calendar introduced the 7-day cycle to other nations. No, other nations, were practicing it. The Gregorian calendar adopted it because it was already in place. Again, the Gregorian calendar came from the Julian calendar, yes, and where the Julian calendar came from? Well, previous calendars from that, probably from Babylon. You talk about human agency. Well, the 7-day cycle in Judaism didn't come from human agency; apparently, it came from God, right? Well, again, these other cultures looked at the sky for signs, just like it says in Genesis 1. And they got it from what they thought was the divine source as well, 7 planetary gods. They looked up and they saw the wanderers. They saw stars going across evenly, but they saw 7 wanderers going differently, not going, and they thought there was gods, just like the Jewish people have 7 archangels. So it's no different.
Okay, I'm not even going to ask you about the so-called claim that there's 7 archangels. There's nowhere. Give me a citation of that if you get the chance. But I'm going to readjust my point and recalibrate my question to you. So you're saying it's not through the Gregorian calendar, and then you started talking about origins. When I'm done with the origin part, the authorship of the 7-day cycle, because you have not provided me a citation. That's challenge number 2. You failed miserably to provide any citation talking about the 7 stars and the 7 wanderers. If that's what the leap of faith that you're making, that the 7-day cycle comes from
practice
I'm asking you a question. If you're going to take a leap of faith to suggest that the 7-day cycle came from Babylon because of 7 wandering stars, when I have a quotation directly where it says
it was just from Babylon. Other cultures.
Okay, whatever culture you're referring to that suggested because of 7 wanderers, stars, or whatever, I gave you a reference where it says that the 7-day cycle is a sign of his authority.
That's question.
Give me a quotation from any any ancient civilization that says the 7-day cycle is my sign. Can you give me that? Or who makes a exclusive claim to the 7-day cycle before the Hebrews?
There's nothing in the Bible that again. Where is this sign? You keep on talking about the sign of the 7 days.
I responded.
It's not. You said it was a deductive proof, but I pointed out all the verses that you showed. it doesn't mention. It mentions keeping the Sabbath holy, that other people will follow the Sabbath.
I didn't quote that.
And it also mentions new moon festivals as well, and so forth.
I'm not talking about the new moon.
There's nothing clear in the Bible that says the 7-day cycle would be any sign of Yahweh.
Okay, let me recalibrate. Let me recalibrate one more time my question, because I'm done with authorship, because I already established Ezekiel 20:12. The Sabbath is my sign, oath, which means signature, which means proof, which means a marker according to the Hebrew.
Yeah, which the world does not follow.
I'm sorry. Can I ask my question? I didn't talk about following.
I'm sorry.
I didn't talk about following the Sabbath, because again, I already told you he could be Lord without your worship. My presentation has no did not stipulate that you have to keep the Sabbath for him to be Lord. The fact that you keep a 7-day cycle, given Israel a chance to keep his Sabbath, shows that he is Lord. That's my argument. My argument is not you would keep the Sabbath. You're a denier. So of course you're not going to keep the Sabbath, and you will be judged for that. So I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about, or the world. I'm talking about those Israel, who are scattered throughout the nations. For him to, for Ezekiel 20:12 and Ezekiel 20:20 to be relevant or to be fulfilled, he has to submit all nations to a 7-day week. That's deductive reasoning. But I'm done with that. I'm going to ask you one more time. Can you give me any quotation from any ancient source that says the 7-day cycle is belongs to those so-called gods, as I have done with the Hebrew scripture? Any citation?
I point out Josephus and the 7 candlestick lamps in the Jerusalem temple are named after those planetary entities. So even Josephus is saying the Jewish temple follow what I'm telling you right now, which you won't accept. But yet Josephus said it was in the Jerusalem temple.
Can you quote me anywhere in scripture that the 7 candlestick is based on 7 archangels? Can you give me any quote? Because I don't care about Josephus. Josephus is not my authority. So can you give me any quotation? Can you give me one question? Can you give me any quotation? Because if Josephus is saying this in the Hebrew, because you're referring to the Babylonian Talmud, that's where the influence. And the thing about Tammuz, you will not find Tammuz mentioned. Tammuz is only mentioned in Hebrew scripture once, and it has nothing to do with a month. So number one,
it's history of what they believed.
No. Give me one example in Hebrew scripture that the word Tammuz, there's a month called Tammuz, and give me any example in the scriptures that says the 7 candlesticks relates to 7 archangels. It's irrelevant to the point, but I'm just saying you're putting things in the air that's A, irrelevant, and B, non-factual. I need you a citation. I need a citation. Could you give that real quickly and then ask your question? Because I have 3 more challenges.
Not all the months are mentioned in the Bible, but I can mention one. You'll find verses in the Bible where it talks about the month of Aviv, but then you'll find verses where it's the same month, talks about the month of Nisan. Now Nisan comes from Babylon, so in the Tanakh itself, it talks about the month of Nisan, which comes from Babylon, because it was renamed from Aviv to Nisan. So I met that challenge.
Okay, well, it's not really my challenge, and again, I totally disagree with you.
You said find it in the Bible. I give you an example.
No. Please don't strawman my question. My question to you was simple. Tammuz, you made your presentation on Tammuz, which is relevant to my presentation because my argument is not based on the monthly cycles. So I don't know why you're arguing for monthly cycles. You said Tammuz. I'm just here to correct you, showing that you cannot cite any biblical verses that make reference to Tammuz, a month of Tammuz, or that makes reference to the 7 candlesticks are based on the 7 archangels. You're just making things up, or you're referring to rabbinic sources. I'm not here to defend the so-called rabbis. I'm here to defend the Hebrew scriptures. So anything you're going to make a claim about, make sure it's in the Hebrew scriptures. Ask your question, and then I have 2 more challenges to show that you failed to respond accordingly.
Okay. Well, do you acknowledge that Babylon did influence Jewish culture?
They did. I just said the Talmud, but not the Hebrew scriptures. The Hebrew scriptures and the rabbinic tradition, 2 different things. The rabbinic tradition, I don't accept their authority. their teachings is based on satanic influence. I don't. It's not my position. I'm not here to defend the rabbis. But
So what-
Hebrew scriptures, I'm sorry, the Hebrew scriptures, you will not find any Babylonian influence in the Hebrew scriptures.
Okay. In the Hebrew scriptures, why does it mention the month of Nisan?
I'm going to do my research on the month of Nisan. I disagree that you claim it comes from Babylon, but the fact still remains. That's again going down a rabbit hole. That's irrelevant to
No,
the
I
7-day cycle argument.
You said point something out about Babylonian influence in the scriptures, and I
That
brought up
has
the
to do
month
with
of Nisan. I met your challenge.
No. That's not part of my challenge. But
Can you tell me what the first month of the Jewish calendar is?
wait. I'm sorry. I want to make sure we understand what we're debating here. We're debating the 7-day cycle, a week, not a month. So again, you saw my video. It's not based on the monthly cycle. It's irrelevant to my argument.
It's
You
totally
try to
relevant
suggest
because I'm pointing out how Jewish culture and Jewish thoughts and ideas about the calendar, about the 7-day cycle, about the Sabbath, all came from previous culture.
No. You argued for Tammuz. I showed you you're wrong about that. You argue for
What am I
7.
wrong about Tammuz?
Wait. Can I respond? You argue for Tammuz. Still waiting for a citation. You argued for 7 archangels, 7 candlestick, trying to make a link. Still looking for a citation in the Hebrew scriptures. So when you say Jewish influence, I'm not here to defend the Jewish rabbinic traditions. You're not debating an Orthodox Jew. You're debating a Hebrew believer in the Hebrew God. So you have to refer to the Bible. And talking about Nisan is irrelevant to my 7-day cycle argument. So I'm gonna challenge you again. So I challenge number 3, which is to produce your historical evidence that the 7-day cycle came through human agency. You totally failed to address that point. And I stipulated 3 challenges to you to address that point. I said, A, the 7-day cycle predates the Gregorian calendar. Number 2, the 7-day cycle 7-day cycle is not universal. The 7-day cycle is universal, but the Gregorian calendar is not. So it cannot account for why it's universally adopted. And
I never said it was.
I'm sorry?
I never said it was.
Okay, so go back again to my 3rd challenge. Can you give me your evidence, or can you produce your historical evidence that the 7-day cycle came through human agency? You're gonna have to start with Rome, and I'm telling you that doesn't meet the standard. So, what is your argument for human agency again?
It came from previous cultures, and it spread over time, just like all these other
the spread. Tell me the spread. How
and so forth.
How did the spread take place? From where? Because you're gonna have to start with Rome. Because Christianity
through travel, through people meeting each other. I gave you an example of the Jewish people in Babylonian exile. They adopted the names of the Babylonians, and it became part of their culture. It happens all the time. It's the evolution of culture throughout the world. It's a very simple, natural thing that happens all the time.
So you're suggesting, let me sure I understand your position. You're saying that human agency, your argument for human agency is that cultures influence other cultures. But the fact of the matter is, every nation, let's go 2,000 years ago. I already addressed your Babylonian claim, no citation saying that it didn't break a recurrent 7-day cycle. I produced my citation. I provided my source. So I'm not going to go to authorship no more. Let's go 2,000 years ago. Only one nation kept the 7-day cycle. Are you telling me every nation 2,000 years ago, all until now, just adopted the 7-day cycle by replacing their cultural and religious practices just because they were influenced by the Hebrews or influenced by whatever nation you want to claim? Why would everybody relinquish their including Rome, relinquish the 8-day cycle? The Chinese, the 10-day cycle, the Japanese, the 10-day cycle. Why would they? France, the root of atheism went from 7 days to 10 days and went back to 7 days after 12 years. Why would they all relinquish their religious and cultural practices in order to adopt the Hebrew 7-day cycle? because that's what you're going to have to respond to for arguing for human agency.
Well, you said, so 2,000 years ago, you're saying only Judea was practicing the 7-day week?
That's my exclusively the 7-day week. The Rome had the Julian calendar in conjunction with the 8-day week, but it was not specifically the 7-day week. So can you give me the reason why every nation, including Rome, relinquished their weekly cycle to adopt the Hebrew 7-day cycle?
Well, again, other cultures, even before the Jewish culture even came about, were practicing the 7-day week.
I'm talking about 2,000 years ago.
I disagree that 2,000 years ago only Judea.
Can you give me
the 7-day week?
Example, please?
Is that the
example?
case?
Is that the case? That's the question, or are you sure, or you're not sure? Can you give me an example of a nation that kept the 7-day cycle besides the Hebrews 2,000 years ago?
Weren't other Middle East countries following the 7-day week? And any nation that was following a lunisolar calendar was following the 7-day week. Isn't that right?
You're talking about the month again? I'm talking about a week, and no, you're wrong. Can you give me the nation that kept the 7-day cycle 2,000 years ago besides the Jews?
Other Middle East countries.
The name. Give me the name, and so we can verify this right now. And
Alexander the Great, he was following the 7-day cycle, and when he conquered the world, all that spread. So again, when
Alexander the Great kept the 7-day cycle, are you saying Greece kept a 7-day cycle during the time of Alexander the Great? You know, you could verify this information real quickly.
Well, what wasn't the Seleucid Empire following that?
My friend, Alexander the Great did not keep a 7-day cycle. My friend, verify your information before you.
When did he follow?
10-day cycle. Ask your question for me.
Well, no, Egypt was following the 10-day cycle.
I know, but
right.
I'm not talking about Egypt right now. Ask your question.
Well, I had to verify. You're claiming, so you're saying 2,000 years ago only Judea followed the 7 days.
You could do that on your own time if you, like I said. If I'm wrong, then correct me. But you should have come prepared because it was part of my video. You should. I said that in my video 2,000 years ago.
I pointed out that people that cultures were following the 7-day cycle even before 2,000 years ago. So
I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about Messiah, from the time of Messiah, because I disagree with all your claims about ancient civilization keeping the 7-day cycle. I provided my citation.
Well, I provided other cultures right there. Even though you don't accept it, well, that's
no. A recurrent 7-day cycle. You said Babylon, Samaria, they all kept the lunar cycle. Added extra day in the 1 or 2 days in the last week, and which I provided my sources.
The Jews added 1 or 2 days too, because not to
the week. I showed you a source that said to the week, not to the month. So totally irrelevant. And the Jews kept 30 days every month. It had nothing to do with but that's a whole different
case. It's a slightly different, but it's
totally irrelevant. I'm not talking about the monthly cycles. So okay, so you asked me a question and I responded accordingly. So I'm gonna ask challenge number 1. Since the 7-day cycle is arbitrary, why is it universally adopted in the light of the fact that every nation kept a different cycle for the cult? Well, I asked you that, you couldn't respond to that, so you felt that as well.
I did
so my last challenge,
multiple times. So we're going around circles.
No, my last challenge. You say you responded to it, but you didn't. Challenge number 4, you tried, but it was totally inadequate. Challenge number 4 is the last one. Explain to me how the Hebrew Scriptures' prediction of the universality of the 7-day cycle is insufficient to prove God, given the fact that he testified, Isaiah 66:23, Ezekiel 20:12, Ezekiel 20:20, Isaiah 56 verse 6 and 7, all together build to this case I'm presenting right now, that he testified about it. He testified it would be the sign of his authority over all nations. What is your explanation? How is that not sufficient enough to establish that the God of the Hebrews is Lord over all nations, given the fact that it is consistent with a novel prediction that people use in science or philosophy?
I did answer this already. There is no prediction of universality. I point out the scriptures you pointed out. It doesn't say it. You're making it up. It's not there.
Again,
Point out the scriptures where it actually says The 7 day week will be a universal prediction of me ruling the world. Where does it actually say that in the scripture?
My friend.
It doesn't.
I built my case.
It talks about honoring the Sabbath, people following the Sabbath, and so forth. There's nothing in the scriptures that directly says what you claim.
My friend. I didn't say that there was a passage in scripture that directly says word for word what I said. I said deductive reasoning. So I'm going to ask you again. Ezekiel 20:12 says the Sabbaths was his sign in the past tense, and the Sabbath will be his sign in the future. So I'm not going to go through all passages. I'm going to go through those two passages. Past tense, future tense. Can you explain to me, given the fact that Ezekiel is writing when all the 10 tribes were exiled in the nations, and Judah was also exiled in Babylon, isn't that a fact that if Ezekiel 20:20 to be fulfilled, every nation where all the Israelites or Israel is scattered to, for them to keep the Sabbath, they have to have a 7-day cycle within that nation? Yes or no?
The Jewish Sabbath, yes. But again, people aren't following. You say, in the future they will, but it's not happening now. So you can't say.
I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't.
Isaiah 66 says, "From new moon to new moon."
I didn't talk
and
about
from
Isaiah.
Sabbath to Sabbath. So you're just going to ignore the moon, the new moon, and new moon.
You could ask me that question after,
and just give the Sabbath to Sabbath.
You could ask me that question later. I'm going to rephrase.
I think we're arguing the same thing over and over.
No.
Why don't we move on to?
No. I didn't address Isaiah 66. You could ask me that question after, easily responded, and I responded to that already.
Well, again,
can I ask my question?
I'm answering the same thing I answered.
No, I know, but I just want to show I just want to show the people how far you have to go and how far you have to avoid reality to deny my presentation. I'm going to ask my question again because you didn't address my point.
Your presentation did not show exact scripture that says the 7-day cycle will be a universal prediction. It doesn't say that.
I already conceded that. It's irrelevant.
Yeah, so you're basically making it up.
No problem. I'm going to repeat my question to you. It's a logical. Can I ask my question? Can I ask my question? You could repeat. I got the right to repeat my question, and then you could respond again. I just want my people to watch and see and witness what happens when you deny Christianity. How far you have to go. I'm going to ask my question again. Ezekiel 20:20. I'm going to go one verse now. Not Isaiah. Ezekiel 20:20 says, the Sabbath will be my sign that I am Yahweh your God. Ezekiel is writing when Israel is scattered throughout the 4 corners of the earth. In quotation. 4 corners of the earth. Is it not true that if this prophecy, for this prophecy to be fulfilled, every nation where Israel has been scattered to has to be submitted to a 7-day cycle? Yes or no? This is a logical argument I'm presenting to you. I want to show people how far you're going to avoid reality. So, is it not a fact that every nation has to be submitted to a 7-day cycle in order for Ezekiel 20:20 to be fulfilled? Yes or no?
Yes. So if every nation is going to follow the Jewish Sabbath, then every nation is going to have a 7-day cycle. Now, are they following the 7-day Sabbath? Do people observe the Sabbath from sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday night? No.
Is my argument that people?
So you can say, oh, well, people are on their way to adopting something that came from Jewish culture, but there's a whole lot other things that they have not adopted.
I'm sorry.
And as I pointed out in my presentation, the secular world is getting farther and farther away from any sort of Christian Sabbath observance, let alone any Jewish Sabbath.
You could ask me that question. Did I ask you about the world keeping the Sabbath? I'm going to repeat one more last time.
I already answered.
No, wait, because you didn't answer my question. Maybe I didn't phrase it correctly. One question.
Did I answer yes? Did I say yes and then clarify?
I'm going to bring some clarification.
Question, and I answered yes, right?
Let me bring some clarification.
For Ezekiel's prophecy to come true, first, the whole world must follow the 7-day cycle, right? And I said yes. So I answered your question, didn't I?
But is it you argue that everybody has to keep the Sabbath when I said Israel? Is Israel all nations?
No.
Why did you argue for all nations, all people when I said Israel? Israel is a sign between Israel and God.
It does not say. It does not say the 7-day cycle. It says the
My
Sabbath.
friend,
the Sabbath is a sign.
You said you said that for this you said yes, and then you said all people are not keeping the Sabbath. I didn't argue for that.
Hallow my Sabbaths, and they may
He's
be a
talking about
sign between
Israel.
me and you.
Why are you talking about all
Right.
people when it's talking about Israel?
Okay, so that's not relevant. It's not if it's just to Israel, then it's not relevant to
Ask
other
your question.
nations,
Ask
right?
your question. My head is about to explode. Ask your question.
Okay. Well, no, I think we're repeating ourselves at this point. So why
No,
don't we
no,
move
no,
on?
no. Do you have a question? Because you're
No,
panicking right now.
I'm done with my
Okay, thank you,
questions.
thank you.
I think
We
we're
could
gonna
go
be going
to
around in
closing
circles.
statement.
So why don't we go
Okay,
to
thank you,
audience
thank
Q
you,
and A?
thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, if you guys are done with the Q&A thing, let me.
I like a final statement before we're done. I
No,
asked
you
him.
can do. Hang on.
Okay,
You can do.
okay,
Let me get to the questions first.
okay,
If you've got to summarize stuff, do that in your closing
okay. No
statement.
problem. No problem.
Let me see here. So the first question that came through was from Shatterhouse for Stanley. In this argument, is this argument supposed to support the claim a Christian God exists? If not, what claim is it arguing for?
It's obviously the Christian God, because Jesus is the one who reaffirmed the prophecy 2,000 years ago, and we've seen from 2,000 years ago the proliferation of the 70 cycle throughout all nations. I asked this man to give me one nation that kept the 70 cycle 2,000 years ago. He always first. He said yes.
No. Hey, whoa. Time out. I want you to just the questions that are going. Don't use the answer portion to take another dig at Floyd. You can do that in your closing statements. You can sum those up. Please just concentrate on answering
But
the question.
it's in line. It's in line with the question that was being posed to me. It was directly linked to the question that was being posed to me. I said 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ reaffirmed the prophecy, and its proliferation was witnessed from 2,000 years ago all the way to the USSR in the 1940s. So it's totally consistent with my argument, suggesting that I asked him for one reference of one country that kept the 7-day cycle 2,000 years ago. He was not able to produce his evidence.
Okay,
that's all. It's consistent.
Okay, all right. Next question coming up here. This is from Grey Knight 777. Question for Stanley. Jesus used an 8-day Julian calendar. How can one conclude anything other than an arbitrarily set length in that context?
Jesus used an 8-day calendar? Can you repeat that? I'm sorry?
Yeah, according to the question, Jesus used an 8-day Julian calendar. How can one conclude anything other than an arbitrarily set length in that context?
My friend, Jesus never used an 8-day calendar. The Roman calendar was not adopted in Judah. It was adopted in Rome, not in Judah. Judah was under the governance of Rome, but they had self-autonomy. Get your information right, all right? Thank you.
Next question. I would apologize. I didn't see any. If anybody has any last questions to get in for Floyd, get them in there. I didn't see any at the time. So, but there's a couple quick ones. One from Red Fang.
To be fair, he could add his 2 cents to every question that comes to me if he wants. I don't want to be seen that I'm the only one answering and nothing. He has nothing to say. He might have some information to provide, so I'm okay with that. You're the host, but I'm okay with that.
Floyd, is there anything in those last 2 questions you'd like to address?
No. I think we can move on.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Third question here. Let's see. Do you have an argument that explains why your claims have to be refuted at all? I could grant the claims about the story's effect. Doesn't seem to prove a God exists.
As I said about the law of cause and effect, and using the scientific method of novel predictions, if you accept gravity is if you accept the theory of general relativity as a fact, then there's no reason why you would not accept the 70 cycle argument. Why? Because there's a prediction being made, and we see the universal effects of it on all nations. So that is consistent with the scientific approach of using and philosophical approach of novel predictions. So that's the reason why you should accept this argument as being conclusive enough.
Anything, Floyd?
I'd like to respond to that. Yeah, again, Einstein's theory is not absolute truth. It has problems at the quantum level, just like the Newtonian theory of gravity. had problems with predicting like the orbit of like Mercury and so forth. So again, they're just models that help that best that try to describe the phenomena that we're experiencing, but neither of these theories are perfect. So something will replace the general theory of relativity. Perhaps the quantum theory of gravity will replace it and so forth. So
Am I allowed to talk again or no?
Yeah.
I think we'll be forever if we keep on going back and forth.
No, one more. I could give one more if Jefferson wants, of course.
No, let's just keep it to one response.
Okay, no problem.
Let's see here. Okay, from Red Fang, initially for Stanley, asking me, does he realize that Christianity came after Rome was already in power? Okay, more of a statement, less of a...
Okay, here's what Christianity is from everything from Genesis to Revelation. Christianity, the Roman Empire adopting so-called Christianity in 321 AD is not true Christianity, because they argued they outlawed the Sabbath, again showing you an effort to censor or to bury the importance of the Sabbath, but it came to no avail. True Christians are those who keep the 7-day Sabbath. As I established in my presentation, Isaiah 56, verse 6 and 7, the strangers who keep the Sabbath will be brought to the his holy mountain, because his mountain will be called a house of prayer for all people. So again, using deductive reasoning for Isaiah 56, verse 6 and 7 to be fulfilled, which culminated in Isaiah 66, verse 23, where we see the fulfillment of that in the kingdom to come. For that to take place, every nation has to be submitted to a 7-day cycle before that happens. So if Isaiah 66 forced Isaiah 66, 23 to be fulfilled, every nation has to be submitted to a 7-day cycle before that. So that's deductive reasoning. So I don't need a verse that says Jesus will submit all nations to a 7-day cycle to show the sign of his sovereignty over all nations. No, that is what I have come to reasonably by the verses I have outlined so far in my presentation.
Floyd, anything?
No.
Okay. Let's see here. This one could be a long one, but also directed at Stanley. Stanley has no citation from the most important source, the Bible, supporting his universal prediction. So what is this deductive reasoning? Premise 1 and premise 2, please.
First of all, deductive reasoning doesn't have to be put in premises. That's number one. I could do that, but it's going to be a whole different discussion. I don't have to do that. I've stipulated my verses, and I'm using deductive reasoning. I'm going to give you one example, and I already said it, but I'm going to say it again. Ezekiel 20, verse 12. The Sabbath will be my sign between me, Yahweh, and you, Israel, that I am God, your creator. For this to be fulfilled, I ask the question, doesn't all nations have to keep a 7-day cycle, since Ezekiel is writing when all of Israel was scattered throughout the 4 corners of the earth? So I don't have to put premises to explain to you that in order for Ezekiel 20:20 to be fulfilled, every nation has to adhere to a 7-day week for Israel to keep the Sabbath. Those who belong to him, not the nations who are against him. So when I was asking a question about Ezekiel 20:20, he answered yes, and then suggested that all nations have to keep the 7-day cycle to fulfill Ezekiel 20:20, which is not the case. All of Israel, those who belong to him, have to keep the Sabbath, will keep the Sabbath, but for that to happen, all nations have to be submitted to a 7-day cycle, showing that he is sovereign, since God submitted all nations to give a chance to us to keep the Sabbath. Deductive reasoning without premises. I don't have to put it in premises.
Okay, interesting. Well, there's a follow-up question that's a little bit more recent, but if Jefferson, can the panelists define deductive reasoning rather than attempt an example at it?
Okay, I could go first. let me show you what deductive reasoning without premises. 2x equals 8, x equals 4. So deductive reasoning, I divided 2x equals 8, 2 divided by 2 divided by 2, x equals 4. I didn't put it in premises there. I don't have to do a philosophical argument for me to prove my case. I could, but I don't want to limit myself to what you guys are trying to box me into. That's deductive reasoning right there. 2x equals 8, x equals 4.
Yeah, so deductive reasoning is from the files necessary if it applies inference rules where if the premises are true, it necessarily follows that the conclusions are rules. So it follows inference rules such as modus ponens, modus tollens, and so forth. So again, if the premises are true, it necessarily follows the conclusion is true. So, for example, if it rains, the street will be wet. It rained, therefore the street will be wet. It necessarily follows that. So again, it follows logical inference rules that if true,
Stanley,
the premises, the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises.
Okay, thank you both. All right, here's another one. Let's see. What people nation was using a 7-day weekly cycle 4,000 years ago? 1,000 years before the Bible was written.
4,000 years ago? So, only the Hebrews, Abraham, Jacob, all the Hebrews, and when I say Hebrew, is everybody from Genesis to Revelation. So a Hebrew is a person that's called out from the nations to be a child of God. So basically, that's what a Hebrew is. Abraham was called a Hebrew. He was a Babylonian, but he was called out the nation of Babylon to become a Hebrew. That's where the word Hebrew started. So, okay, we could say Hebrews really started, the name started with Abraham, but the concept of, no, it did start with Abraham because only Abraham was called out of a nation. So that's what a Hebrew is, to be called out of a nation. So we could say, I don't know how, I think Abraham was like 2000 BC. I'm not sure. But all I know is that the law of God is eternal, as per Psalms 119 and 89. So the 70 cycle is part of that law. The Sabbath is part of that law. So obviously the 70 cycle was being kept by Adam, by Eve, by Noah, and all the saints in Scripture. So I gave my references showing that the Sabbath keeping or the Sabbath was established from Genesis and is directly linked to the 70 cycle, while all you heard is talking about some luminaries or some things in the skies, and somehow because of that there was a 70 cycle. No citation from any primary source that they kept a 7 days recurrent cycle. Adding extra days to the last week is not recurrent. I provided my citation from Pinch's Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, making it clear they broke the recurrent 7-day cycle. He didn't provide a source. So we know who knows what he's talking about.
And again, that's not necessary. It's not necessary.
Yeah, you really don't need to do that, Stanley. Anyway, Babylonians, Sumerians began. This is the last question. Babylonians, Sumerians began using 7-day week 4,100 years ago. How was that prophesied in the Bible? And also, since this one is kind of similar to the previous one, Floyd, if you want to jump in on this, please do. But otherwise, I think this last one was also. It wasn't really. This last one wasn't addressed to anybody specifically, so. But I'll read it again. Babylonians/Sumerians began using 7-day week 4,100 years ago. How was that prophesied in the Bible?
Yeah, again, I mean, the Sumerian is a much older culture than the Hebrew culture, and they were practicing the 7-day cycle. You asked about evidence. I believe they found a recent calendar. Shoot, let me find it. Actually, I have an article here on the origins of the Hebrew Sabbath, written by a reverend. Let me pull up the PDF. Yeah, here we go. This is the origin of the Hebrew Sabbath. The J.T. Nichols, in his article, he says Or should consider the origin of the Sabbath with special reference to new light thrown on the subject by observances of the ancient Babylonians on the 7th day as revealed by the newly discovered Ulu calendar. So there's a citation that you're looking for.
Yeah, I've heard about that calendar as well.
Yeah.
Do I get to respond to the question? Because I think the question was really for me.
Yeah, the question was really for you. You didn't respond, so I went first. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, the old calendar makes reference to a 7-day week, recurrent week. Is that a citation from that? Because I heard the citation that says there's a lot of speculation being made in that citation, but nothing about a 7-day recurrent week. So I don't know. As far as the prophecy goes for Samaria and Babylon, again, Babylon and Samaria did not keep a 7-day recurrent week. So again, I need a primary, even a secondary source with a citation. Like if you're going to go to a scholar, just give me a citation from that scholar why they believe the 7-day cycle was being adopted by Sumerians or Babylonians, talking about the luminaries or talking about the Earth calendar or whatever calendar you were talking about. I didn't hear nothing about a recurrent 7-day week there. But when you're desperate, you say anything. The 70, the prophecy.
What was the name of these other days? If you claim that they're adding on days and they're extending the week, what were the names of week 8 and week 9 and so forth? Did they have names for them? Because they had names for adding the extra month on. Like for example, the 13th month of the Jewish calendar was Adar 2, but none of these cultures had names for any additional days that you're claiming. Again, they kept to a 7-day week, and they had names for each one. And I gave each one, it was a god's name based on the planetary entities.
Okay, I want to answer the question that was posed to me. Again, I responded to Floyd's question already multiple times. Give me a citation. I give the citation. Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics. It broke the continuous 7-day week. He didn't provide me a citation. He just claiming things, but it's okay. As far as the question about this Babylon and Samaria, first of all, they did not keep a 7-day week, and second of all, only the Hebrew scriptures makes a prediction. Let's say I would accept your lie about Babylon and Samaria. It still wouldn't really argue against my position. Why? Because only the Hebrew scriptures predicted its universal adherence, and it's antecedent to its universal application throughout the world. So it still wouldn't hurt my argument if I would accept your lies about the 7-day cycle being Sumerian or Babylonian. It's Sumerian and Babylonian, but no prediction about it, no claims to it in the primary sources. Just a whole bunch of speculation and claims that cannot be substantiated. Thank you.
Okay, you guys want to move on to final statements?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank
go
you.
ahead. Go
Thank
ahead.
So I provided 4 challenges, and I said if he was not able to meet the standards of these 4 challenges, he would have lost the debate. So challenge number 1, since the 70 cycle is arbitrary, why is it universally adopted in light of the fact that every nation kept a different cycle for cultural and religious purposes? His response was people influence people, nations influence nations. But I told him Japan kept a 7-day cycle in the 8th century. Did he respond to that? No. I said the 7-day cycle was implemented in Rome, who was governing over Israel in the 1st century AD and BC with the Julian calendar. Did he respond to that? No. He went back to Babylon. Every time I was talking about the propagation of the 7-day cycle, all he was doing is going back, avoiding the question. So he did not, and he tried to suggest the fact that the 7-day cycle is arbitrary somehow militates against my argument, which it doesn't. It only supports my argument. Since you claimed, Floyd claimed, that it was influenced from Babylon and Samaria, which depended on the lunar cycle, when the 7-day cycle in the Hebrew scripture doesn't depend on the lunar cycle. Totally arbitrary. Has nothing to do with nature, as opposed to the Babylonian and Sumerian calendar, which depends on the lunar cycle. In Genesis 1 account, the moon and the sun was created on the 4th day. So they were keeping the Sabbath. The first 3 days, there was already a calculation of time without the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon. Yeah. So he failed challenge number 1. Challenge number 2: produce any primary ancient source that makes claim to the 7-day recurrent cycle before the Hebrews. I provided my source that makes it clear. Pinch's Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics makes it clear that the 7-day cycle, they had the first 3 weeks, the Babylonian week, first 3 weeks were 7 days, and the last week they would add an extra 1 or 2 days to that week, not to the month, to the week, in order for them to align it their cycle with in order for them to be aligned with the cycle of the moon. I provided my citation. He didn't provide any citation. He provided a citation, but it doesn't even address the point about the 7-day week. So he fails that challenge. Challenge number 3: produce your historical evidence that the 7-day cycle came through human agency. He spoke about the names of the days of the week, which is not universal. Every Arab country doesn't have those names. Israel doesn't have those names within their in their calendar. So he came with a whole bunch of arguments that does. First of all, he started talking about the monthly cycles, which is irrelevant to my argument. So he came with a whole bunch of arguments that's irrelevant to establish how did the 7-day cycle become universal. I provided multiple examples. Example again, Japan adopting the 7-day cycle before Western influence. He didn't address that. So he failed miserably to provide any historical evidence that the 7-day cycle came through human agency. All he said is people influence people. Oh, the Babylonian influence the Jews. I'm not here to defend the Jews. I'm here to defend the Hebrew God. But he said the Babylonian influenced the Jews with Tammuz. I asked him for one reference in the scriptures for anything about a month of Tammuz. No evidence, no citation. I give him, and then he started talking about the 7 lamps, which is relevant to my argument, relevant to the topic of discussion. The 7 lamps or candles are influenced by the Babylonians because it speaks about 7 archangels. I said, where is that in scripture? Couldn't cite that. He's going to rabbinic sources and to Josephus. I'm not here to defend Josephus. I'm not here to defend the rabbis, the so-called rabbis, the Hebrew scriptures. He came to debate somebody else. He's fighting on a different mountain. I'm here defending the Hebrew scriptures. He failed miserably. My challenge number 3. Now, challenge number 4. Explain how the Hebrew scriptures' prediction of the universality of the 7-day cycle is insufficient to prove God, given the fact that he testified that it would be the sign of his authority over all nations. He said, show me a verse that says that specifically. I don't have to. Deductive reasoning. What did I do? I went to multiple verses, but I gave one verse specifically, Ezekiel 20, verse 20. I will make the Sabbath my sign, future tense, sign, signature, marker, a memorial between Israel and myself, your God. When Ezekiel said this, every nation, Israel was scattered throughout the 4 corners of the earth. So for Israel to keep the Sabbath and for this prophecy to be fulfilled, every nation where Israel has been scattered through, which is all nations, have to keep a 7-day cycle, which they weren't. We saw 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ reaffirmed this prophecy, and we saw the propagation or the universal application of the 7-day week, the domino effect from 2,000 years ago till now. He suggested that 2,000 years ago there was a nation keeping a 7-day week. I asked for the reference or example. He wasn't even sure, but he wasn't sure, but he was ready to defend a position that he's not even sure about, which is quite telling for my people that's going to be watching this video. This is what happens when you are trying so hard to avoid reality. So, and he somehow suggested that the prophecy in Ezekiel 20, he said yes, first, that for Ezekiel 20:20 to be fulfilled, all nations has to be submitted to a 7-day cycle. Then he suggested it was not fulfilled, contradicting himself, suggesting that all nations are not keeping the Sabbath. Did I say anything about all nations keeping the Sabbath? I said all nations keeping the 7-day cycle given Israel, because there's a sign between Israel, not nations, Israel, those who belong to him, and God, that I am your God and that I sanctify you. So why would he suggest that all people have to keep the Sabbath as if that was part of my argument? It's not part of my argument. It's never been stipulated as being part of my argument. So, and it's totally irrelevant to the case I'm presenting. When you're desperate, you say anything. So thank you very much. He failed all 4 challenges. And I said, if he fails in those 4 challenges, this is a way to gauge who won the debate. I decisively won the debate, and I get glory to Jesus Christ for that. Thank you.
Hey, Floyd, your turn.
Okay. Well, I don't think it's up to Stanley to decide what I have to meet to. He doesn't declare the terms of what it takes to win a debate or not. I'll let the audience decide that. But throughout his presentation, he brought up verse after verse, which doesn't say anything about the 7-day cycle being the science. He keeps on asking that question, where the scriptures don't indicate that at all. He points to Ezekiel 20, but he conveniently skips 2019. Let me read it in more of a context. So it says, "I am the Lord your God. Walk in my statutes and be careful to observe my ordinances and hallow my Sabbaths, that they may be a sign between me and you, that you may know I am the Lord your God." So you have to walk in his statutes, be careful to obey his ordinances, and hallow my Sabbaths. And again, is the whole world following Jewish the 613 Jewish laws found in Tanakh? Are they observing the ordinances? Are they keeping the Sabbath hollow by observing it from sundown, from Friday night to Saturday night? No, they're not. He brought up Isaiah 66, which says from Sabbath to Sabbath, people will worship God, but it also says from new moon to new moon. He brings up other cultures adding on to a week. Well, again, they had a 7-day week. They had names for each 7 days. They because of the lunar cycle being longer than 28 days, they had to add on extra days, just like the Jewish people did, add on extra days, because when does a new month start? When a new moon comes. It's not after 28 days. It's after 29.53. So sometimes they have to go to 29 days. Sometimes they have to go to 30 days. Sometimes, and again, that doesn't line up with the solar year. The solar year is 365 days, where the lunar year is only 354. So they have to make up for that time as well. Just the way the people following the Gregorian calendar, we have leap years. So we add a day on for a leap year. And every now and then we have to add a leap second. It's just adjusting. He talks about Japan and so forth. Countries are slowly adopting things as travel and more global communication. So there's nothing big deal about that. Again, and there's nowhere in the scripture where it clearly says that the 7-day cycle is the sign that God has authority over the world. It's not there. He's just taking scriptures, cutting out parts like new moon and keeping ordinances and stuff like that, just to make his theory. So I think that is all I have. I thank you for this opportunity.
All right. Okay. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Yeah, I guess that's going to do it. Question was asked about the poll that I put out there. Someone had asked me to ask the question, do you think that Stanley is making a convincing case? It is overwhelmingly no.
Ad populum.
That's not that. I'm not presenting an argument. I'm presenting the verifiable results of a poll. So accusing me of an ad populum fallacy doesn't really apply here. The issue with that, Stanley, is your argument might not be as convincing as you'd like to think it is, because it's not winning over a lot. So, okay. With that, thank you guys both. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. And I'm going to wrap it up here because I have a few things to do. And yeah, Floyd, it was good. Oh, okay. Well, I guess he just left. Okay. I'm wondering if he's going to go into the live chat. And Floyd, it's good to see you. And yeah, I think it was the one thing that my biggest criticism, I think, I don't really have a criticism for you other than
I interrupted him a couple of times, so I apologize for that.
Yeah, but I mean that stuff happens. I wouldn't even really chalk that up to anybody else. I think that, like, I liked your presentation and some of the stuff that you got into, but I think and this is the first time you guys are talking, but I think for him, given the way I've seen him talk about that, you got into things that I think you had a lot of layers that built into that, and he's just looking for one clean. He wants this one specific answer, which that leads to my biggest criticism of the debate between either of you was with him. Basically, when asked by you multiple times, hey, cite something specific in the Bible that says something about this universal application of a 7-day week, and he's like, no, I'm concluding that deductively. So it's okay for him to go through the Hebrew Bible and bits and pieces of the New Testament and just pick this stuff out like he's beautiful minding this theory together. But when you present things like, well, look at these demonstrations that we have of borrowed names of other gods for days and months and all these other kinds of things, and shared cultural festivities and things like that, is, oh, I want a citation that verbatim states what you're saying. Like, that is, I don't, if Terry's still listening, that is a classic shifting of burden right there. Like, you're able to go through and say, hey, look at this cool theory I came up with by matching these different things in here, and I think there's a pattern, and that's cool, that's fine. But when somebody like Floyd is presenting the same thing from an historical perspective, you blew that off and wanted, basically, it sounds like what Terry wants is for somebody to show him the part in the Bible that says, Stanley Terry's wrong, just ignore his theory. And until that pops up in a Bible, he's just gonna assume that he's right. So this will probably be the last debate I host for a while, and it will definitely probably be the last one I host for Stanley, because this is the second one I've hosted with him in it, and it's, I think, the fourth one I've seen, and I haven't seen this technique change, and I haven't really seen him grow. So yeah, that's my last thoughts on it. But Floyd, you got any last thoughts? Since you're the last one here, you didn't take off quickly. But
well, I don't want to toot my own horn with him not here.
Well, go ahead. I mean, sorry.
I don't know. I guess my point was to show that other cultures influence Jewish cultures. It's not the other way around. Jewish culture did not really influence other cultures. The other cultures came first, and Jewish culture just adapted what they've already came with and made it their own. It's like I pointed out that all the festival of the unleavened bread and Yom Kippur and Passover, they were just recontextualized. Those festivals already existed, and the Israelites were former Canaanites. The Exodus didn't happen. I could have gone into the Exodus being fiction and so forth. That's a whole other debate. But they were just former Canaanites, just like Phoenicians and all the other things. They all followed the 7-day week. They all had their Sabbaths and so forth. Things develop over time. They evolve. They change. They tweak a little. The whole idea of the 13th day. They had 12 months. But at the end of the 12th month, they looked at the crops. They looked at the barley, and if it wasn't going to ripen in time, they had to add a 13th month. Because why? Because the Passover had to happen at the time of the harvest. So if it wasn't ready for the harvest, they had to extend it to another month. So what does that have to do with the Jewish slaves leaving leaving Egypt. It has nothing to do with it. What it really has to do with it is the harvest, is the crops. That's what these festivals are really about.
Right.
And I pointed out that that the Sabbath, it had one meaning in Exodus, that God created the world in 6 days and rested. But then in Deuteronomy, it says, "Oh, the reason we have the Sabbath is because I freed you from Egypt." What does freeing you from Egypt have to do with keeping the seventh day, the last day of the week, holy? I don't see anything. But again, these are recontextualized harvest festivals. I mean, they looked at the moon, they looked at the wandering stars, and they thought, "Oh, those are gods. Those are angels and so forth." That's where this stuff comes from.
Yeah. So, well, and with that, thanks again, Floyd. Stanley, if you're still watching, thanks again too. I guess we'll call it end of that. So I will wrap it up here. Thank you to everybody in the live chat. Thank you for your questions. Thank you again for your super chats. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Take care of yourself, and I will catch you later.
Bye.